Hey there everyone, Mazarok here, and today is the Necrolord Blood DK Guide. Now, Necrolord has definitely come out as one of the stronger, more favored options, especially for Raid and Mythic Plus, given how the new encrypted affix works, the double legendaries, and kind of everything that's going along with the kit. Where some redundancies were made in 9.1 and 9.2, which may have gotten you to swap over to Venthyr, those work really well with the tier set now, and they're less redundancies and more better parts of the kit. So, let's go over what Necrolord has to offer for its abilities and double legendary combinations, and then we'll go over the tier sets, talents, and all of that fun stuff. So, of course, Fleshcraft is a 2-minute cooldown, which you should use as often as possible. If you have enough threat generated, this is actually a good cooldown to use because it is also a 20% damage reduction. Very strong while you're channeling that, or you can use it right before a pull and have a nice big shield and be a little bit safer as you go along. Slappy Hands. Now, this here is one of the funnest abilities to press in the game. You sprout an additional limb, dealing shadow damage over 16 seconds to all nearby enemies, deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets every 1 second. An enemy is pulled to your location if they are further than 8 yards away from you. This is a great control. This is a great way to just pull and get everybody exactly where you want them. I absolutely love it. As well as it gains 3 bone shield charges instantly, and you gain every 4 seconds. Now, we add the double legendary into this because we have a Covenant legendary now. Abomination's limb duration is increased by 4 seconds, and the frequency it grants bone shield charges is increased by 2 seconds, and the first time an enemy is damaged by A-bomb limb, they take 20% increased damage from you for 12 seconds. This is already a very strong double legendary, but didn't quite add up to Super Strain or Crimson Rune Weapon, but it was not far behind. Now that you get to equip both, which if you're going to only make one legendary aside from the Unity one, like if you only have the gold for one, go with Crimson Rune Weapon. It does have raid utility, absolutely, although Super Strain ekes out a little bit harder there until you get your 4-piece, and then it's Crimson Rune Weapon with situational uses for Super Strain. But if you're going to make one, Crimson Rune Weapon. If you're going to make 2 and you have the money for 2 and you want to be situationally more optimized, Super Strain is your second go-to aside from that. Now, I already had Crimson Rune Weapon on my belt. That's where I kept it, and I made it on the boots. There's a couple of options that you could make your Unity on, so I just went with boots. It was one of them. It was one of those that I looked into that was well optimized because Crimson Rune Weapon can only be on either tier pieces or belt, so you basically only want it on your belt. Now let's go over the tier set. I did cover this in the other one, and I'm going to be covering it again, so sorry if anybody watched the Night Fae one and you're listening to this again. I am going to cover it again. 2-piece. While your Dancing Rune Weapon is active, Heart Strike extends the duration of Dancing Rune Weapon by 0.5 seconds and increases your strength by 1%, persisting for 10 seconds after Dancing Rune Weapon ends. 4-piece. When you take damage, you have a chance equal to 100% of your parry chance to lash out, Heart Striking your attacker. Dancing Rune Weapon now has 2 rune weapons. So every time you parry, you get 2 Heart Strikes instantaneously as it does that based on your parry chance. Now, Critical Strike is your parry chance stat, but it's not something that you really want to stack. It's something that I want higher than 18% for sure, and I'm going to be working at getting more Critical Strike. It was something that I ignored in previous tiers, and I just now do not have enough pieces that have that Critical Strike that I'd like to be able to get it on my secondary. So I am going to be focusing to get that more. But where you're going to get your biggest amount of parry chance, is from Dancing Rune Weapon. So your Crimson Rune Weapon is going to reduce every time a bone shield charge is used. You're going to reduce the cooldown of Dancing Rune Weapon by 5 seconds. This really does bring it to a 45-second to a minute-long cooldown. Very strong. Brings this down even further, which is very nice, and especially because Slappy Hands has a 2-minute cooldown. Whenever your party can take you really want them to take as a blood DK, especially with this build. More Slappy Hands, more easy pulls, more easy threat, it really does work and synergize with one another very, very well. Woe is already situationally useful, we know that, and I mean, Vi is just a nightmare. Nobody swaps to him to kill him. He teleports off to friggin' Narnia while you're trying to deal with your pack, and a lot of these packs have casters, so they're not always the most fun to move. Yes, you can death grip one over every 15 seconds or whatnot, but you can't move entire packs sometimes. And with Vi just being as annoying as he is, you're just not getting the use out of him. I say just go more cooldowns throughout an entire dungeon equals more damage than just 15% flat haste, but that's just me, and if you keep going with consistently, you will get slappy hands way more often, you can easily bring it down to a strong, to where it's really, really effective all of the time, and because Unity works very, very well with how it works out, that's where you want to go. Now, let's talk about stats a little bit. In 9.2, haste is king for Blood DK. With how the tier set works, with how Crimson Rune Weapon interacts with the tier set, you want as much haste as possible. If every piece of gear you have can at least have haste stat on it, you're doing well. Mastery is still very strong. Versatility is still a triple threat, very good to have. And crit is no longer a completely useless stat because you want parry chance. So stack haste as much as possible, and then you're going to have to find a nice balance that you like between crit, mastery, and verse, but there are no pieces of gear that have bad stats on them anymore. That is very, very nice, but that also means that you have to find a balance to where you like to survive, be strong, be able to heal yourself properly, and not have to mess around with things too much. So keep that in mind. Strong trinkets for Blood DK. The Blood Spattered Scale, amazing. Get yourself Still Bist for all tanks. Just get one. The other one, it comes from Tassivest Streets. This one here has been showing to be very, very strong for Blood DKs in particular, which is the Codexes of the First Technique. Get yourself one of these. I've been farming. I've been trying to get into Streets whenever I can. Have not been as lucky as I would like to be with this one, but that just is what it is. It reflects 10% of incoming damage for up to 10 seconds, up to a maximum absorb. It does have a good, strong, high chance to proc, and it works very, very well with Blood DKs, because Blood DKs don't mitigate as much damage as other tanks, which mitigates that 10% of reflect, where you tend to just heal yourself up in most cases instead of relying on a DR to survive. You time your death strikes properly. Very, very strong for Blood DKs. Talents. Now, in talents, we have different talents for Raid and Mythic Plus, and when you get your 2 and your 4 piece, and what legendary you're running. So let me break this down. This is your basic setup for Mythic Plus with no tier set and double legendaries. Heartbreaker, Hemostasis, Blood Tap, Will of the Necropolis, Grip of the Dead. Voracious has now overtaken Bloodworms, and there are a couple factors to that. One is with the double legendaries and the DPS, there's a lot of mobs that just get completely annihilated when all of the DPS CDs are up and you're just not getting the effective use of Bloodworms. So Voracious has shifted over to being the stronger option, especially with the amount of leech that you get and the increased healing to Death Strike. This will make you feel a lot more safe than Bloodworms. I would just probably hard swap to this now. Bone Storm is a great AoE heal and a great AoE damage ability. That is a little bit more difficult to use with the Necrolords because you don't have as much runic power generation as, say, with Venthyr or Night Fae. But when you get to that 100 and you know that you're kind of safe and you don't need to Death Strike immediately, like, if your next global has to be a Death Strike, don't hit Bone Storm. But if you know you have you have 2-3 seconds before a tank buster is going to come in or anything like that, Bone Storms are really good. This is just not what you want to use on single target. So if it's just straight up bosses, just hit Death Strike. Don't worry about Bone Storm, but in AoE scenarios, Bone Storm is absolutely fantastic. Now, when you get your 2-piece, you're going to want to swap over to Bone Storm, especially 2-piece with Necrolord. Tombstone starts being about equal with Heartbreaker at the 2-piece with other Covenants, but with Necrolords, you have a lot of redundancy with how many Bone Shield charges you get. Because what happens is Slappy Hands generates Bone Shield charges. Dancing Rune Weapon generates Bone Shield charges, and with how low we're getting the cooldown here, you're going to get a lot of redundant Bone Shield charges that are just going to go to waste. But what happens here is you consume these 5 Bone Shield charges, which actually reduces the cooldown of Dancing Rune Weapon as well for each Bone Shield charge used. Very nice work around there, which when you start playing it right is going to be very, very strong. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to. It's a little bit more technical, but it's going to be very strong. And with being your encrypted affix of choice, which I kind of hope it is, this is going to work very, very well with it because it's going to reduce the cooldown of it even further, giving you damage absorbs, giving you more runic power generation when you need it, so you can go into a Tombstone and Death Strike almost immediately, as long as you're, not if you're completely tapped on runic power. If you have 10 runic power already and you kind of got a little bit pooled, you can go into a Tombstone and then immediately a Death Strike, and you don't have to worry about it too much, and you've got a nice big absorb. So it's a good defensive play, and it's a good for runic power generation, which Necrolord tends to struggle with a little bit more. Like I said, other than like Venthyr, Night Fae have a little bit of an easier time with this, but Necrolord, because of the massive amount of bone shields that you're going to get, Tombstone is a very strong play. I would even say if you don't have a 2-piece, you could swap to this now and start getting used to it, and you should be fine. For rating, Tombstone is going to be the play once you have your 2 and your 4-piece. Blood Drinker is still very strong. I would swap over to Wraithwalk for a movement ability in the raid, because a 90% slow is pretty much useless in most scenarios within the raid. Raid bosses don't be slowed, things like that. Wraithwalk just gives you an extra bonus. And then Red Thirst reduces the cooldown of Vampiric Blood by 1.5 seconds per runic power spent. This will bring Vampiric Blood down quite significantly. It has a base 1.5 minute cooldown, and I have seen it go down to about 40-45 seconds. 50 seconds is consistent. So a very, very nice option there. It works very, very well. But Tombstone as well, especially once you get your 2-piece. Very, very strong ability. This you won't get as much of this in raid immediately without your 2-piece, because you're not constantly tanking, which means you're not going to have as much Dancing Rune Weapon uptime if you were in Mythic Plus, being the only tank there and being the only one ever getting hit. So keep that in mind. Those are the raid talents. Now for Soulbinds, you do have 2 options. Merilith is kind of your general go-to now. There's a lot of strong things about it, but this is what it should look like. You have 3 potency conduits, so you're going to want Brutal Grasp, Withering Plague, and Adaptive Armor Fragment. The extra strength is a very nice additive to what you get. For you're going to have 2 the Finesse conduits. Spirit Drain, still very strong. Runic Power every time you kick stuff. You should be kicking stuff in Mythic Plus anyway. Very, very strong. This loses a little bit in raid, so in raid I would go with the Condensed Animosphere on this portion, because there's just not as many things to kick. Although there are certain fights, for example, Prototype Pantheon, Spirit Drain, very, very useful. So you can swap over these 2 whenever you feel like you're going to need the need. And then Chilled Resilience, the Icebound Fortitude, the cooldown of Icebound Fortitude is reduced by 40 seconds. This is a 252 conduit, so it brings it down to 2.3 minutes. Very strong. If you are in a coordinated, and this I have to specify, coordinated Mythic Plus group, where you guys are planning out cooldowns, you're working everything out, Emini does get out ahead because of the extra primary stat that you are giving your friends and your allies. This will pull ahead in that scenario, but if you are not coordinated and your DPS are not making effective use of the lead by example, Merilith is going to be the play. So let's face it, most of the time Merilith is just going to be the play. So that is it for the Necrolord Blood DK. All in all, Blood DK is a very, very strong tank this tier. Still very technical if you're looking for something very fun to play. You are almost unkillable. Slappy Hands is still just an absolute blast to play. Fleshcraft, great cooldown. Honestly, you cannot go wrong playing with BDK this tier at all. Lots and lots of fun. Please, if you like this type of content, Please subscribe. It goes such a long way. This is a growing community, and I would love to see it grow even further. But one Slappy Hands gave me 10 Bone Shield charges, and I didn't even hit Dancing Rune Weapons. So that, honestly, that is really, really what you need to see there. How high Kevin's Oozling. Does it have a hat? It has a hat. That's funny. There is a growing community on Twitch as well. Please, if you would like to watch Twitch, subscribe there. Would love to hear from you guys. As well, there is a Discord community down below full of positive people just willing to help anybody with any tanking or any questions that you have at all in the game. Go ahead, join that. Link is down below. I did make a beginner's guide to Blood DK. Link for that down below as well, where I go over the base kit and what makes Blood DK Blood DK. So go over and check that out if you're confused over some stuff that I may have skipped, because this is more a 9.2, assuming that you've played Blood DK for at least a little bit. But if you just boosted this character to 60 and you don't quite know what the whole kit does, you're going to want to watch that video, because Blood DK is a very technical tank that is absolutely unkillable when played right. Basically, in most scenarios, it's absolutely insane and a ton of fun. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys are enjoying 9.2 as much as I am. I hope you guys are getting all of the tier and you're having fun with your tier sets as well. Enjoy your day. Thank you very much for listening.